Hopefully you can all hear me. You've unmuted me, Amber. Good morning and welcome everyone. So I'd imagine most of you are either sat at your kitchen table, sofa, in the spare room, in the loft, or as this is a webinar purely for guys in the south, and we're on a lovely day yet again, maybe you're lucky enough to be sat in the garden. For those of you that don't know me, my name is James Fone, and I'm a regional distribution manager for Travellers in London and the South. And along with my colleagues, Kieran Sims, who some of you may know, and John Ashton, we're collectively responsible for the distribution of all lines of Travellers business and our relationship with our broker partners from our offices, if we were there, in London, Redhill and Birmingham. So we all know why we're here today. We're here today to talk about cyber and hopefully increase your confidence with the subject and talking with your clients. To help this, as Amber said, I'm joined by Davis Kessler, who heads up our cyber proposition in the UK and Europe. And we'll both be talking you through this webinar. We also have Amber, you just heard her in the background, and she's from our marketing team, and she'll be running the polls. We'd really like you to get involved in today and sort of looking after the crowds that are trying to get into this webinar because it's so popular. So one screen that comes up here, just some legal notices you'd expect us to point out as an insurer around data protection, etc. So I'll leave that on the screen for a couple of seconds, but won't talk too much about it. So let's go straight into it. And use a poll straight away. Hopefully you'll start getting a poll coming up on your screen. So if as many of you can take part in the poll, that'll be great. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how confident are you at selling cyber insurance? I think from memory, because we're using Zoom, if the poll doesn't work, although I'm looking at it and most of you should be able to see it, you can send your number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through on the Q&A function. It doesn't work. So let's just have a look. Give it a few more seconds. So we've got 71% of you voted so far. So we'll have a 70%. So most of you in there in the middle, sort of fairly confident, but not really confident in selling cyber. So let's see if we can increase that, increase your confidence, and hopefully give you a few tips along the way. So this is what we'll be covering today. Firstly, the cyber landscape and where we are today. Second, we'll spend some time discussing objection handling and sort of common feedback we think you're getting from your clients. Third, and quite scary for me anyway, I'll be doing a live demo and getting the cyber quote from our system. So get your stopwatches at the ready. And finally, we'll talk about some of the benefits and enhancements of Travellers' enhanced cyber offering. But now I'm going to pass you over to Davis Kessler to talk about the cyber landscape. So Davis, over to you.
All right, thanks James, and thanks for everyone attending on what is a glorious day. I'm sure you've got plenty of distractions out there, but we'll try to get through this quick. And we'll start by talking about what we as insurers are seeing in the market and what losses we're paying. This will be really high level. This could, of course, take a full day on itself to talk about all of the cyber risk trends out there, but we'll make it real quick. It really boils down to 3 key loss types that have become the norm within the cyber insurance world. And those are ransomware, business email compromise leading to social engineering fraud, and good old-fashioned data breaches. We'll talk in detail on each of these in a bit. But ransomware has really become the #1 concern in terms of amounts paid in cyber insurance. It's not quite as frequent as business email compromise and social engineering fraud, but when those events do happen, the loss amounts are quite significant. Thanks, James. So you can see here on ransomware, if you go back just a few years, you think about WannaCry, NotPetya, just a couple years ago. really, really massive events that impacted hundreds of thousands of computers around the world. But really, the demands made were in the hundreds of pounds, hundreds of dollars. NotPetya itself, again, impacted over 100,000 computers worldwide, but that demand only requested $300 in Bitcoin. That has skyrocketed over the last very brief amount of time. You look at the chart here, which is from Coveware. Just in the last 5 quarters, we've seen a nearly tenfold increase in the amount of average ransom paid. What used to be a rare event to get even a 4-figure ransom demand, certainly not anywhere reaching 5 or 6 figures. Now 6, even 7 figures are quite common in terms of demands that we have seen, and some even higher than that. Now these can obviously be negotiated down in many instances, but you can see just here the average ransom payment in Q1, by no means a small bit of money to be paid to get out of this. And there's really a couple reasons behind that. Before, when these ransom demands were really low and it was more of a worm type attack that tried to infect as many computers as possible, it's now morphed into a more targeted type of attack where these criminals will infiltrate a company, get into their email, learn about the company, learn about when they are most susceptible, when it will hit and hurt the most, and really studying their victims and then pulling the trigger at the right moment. The types of ransomware itself, the actual files are much more malicious than they used to be insofar as their ability to spread horizontally within a network. So usually, one access point could be a individual employee's email, or we've seen a lot of remote desktop open ports be the route in for these bad guys. But once they get that foothold, they're really able to spread and infect horizontally within the network, and critically often getting into backups as well. The other major trend we're seeing with respect to ransomware is the use of managed service providers as kind of the conduit for these criminals to attack multiple firms, multiple targets all at once. So you can see here on the left of the screen results from a UK government survey. Really good survey if you haven't had a chance to look at it. 1,400 firms of all sizes responded to it, so a good snapshot of the UK market as a whole. And you can see quite a few firms outsource parts of their IT functions, even their IT security functions, a managed security service provider, as that would often be called. Some medium firms, nearly 2/3 are using managed service providers in some source. And in a lot of ways that makes sense. I'm not here to say that's not a good option, because for many firms, outsourcing their IT or their IT security will actually give them better security than if they try to do it themselves. Nevertheless, you got to be aware that this is a means for the criminals to get in. So if they infiltrate that managed service provider, they basically have the keys to the back door to all of that MSP's customer base. So that's definitely a trend that we've seen. Social engineering fraud really needs no introduction. I'm sure you're all well aware of this, and your clients, this is probably top of their concern, and for good reason. This is happening with quite heavy frequency. And while the not demands, the amounts transferred aren't often, at least 7 figures like some ransomware payments. A 25K, 50K funds transfer that you're unlikely to get back is going to be a pretty significant hit to most clients. One of the things I do want to focus on here is kind of the unfortunate consequences of email compromise. We know that these criminals are infiltrating email in order to look for that quick win. They're trying to find invoices that they can manipulate, information about upcoming transactions that they can step in and pose as one of the parties to cause a funds transfer fraud. They just want that financial gain. You know, I'm not saying that the black market isn't there for stolen information. That does still happen on the dark web, of course. However, for the most part, these criminals want that quick financial hit. But what a firm that has this happen to them may not appreciate at first is they may have a data breach on their hands as well. So if these bad guys get into an email inbox, you know, you think about all of the emails you do on a day-to-day basis, your business emails, personal emails, most likely, and how many contacts you have, how many emails flow in on a daily basis, that will contain a lot of private information. So when these events occur, one of the things that you will need to do as a impacted victim is get a forensics team in there to see what did the criminal access, you know, what could they have seen, and then if there was personal information at risk, get a legal opinion as to whether or not the requirements of GDPR or whatever jurisdiction you're in require notification, and then if it does, those costs will start to add as well.
Yeah, Davis, I was just thinking this morning, actually, if you think about your personal life, how many user IDs and logins that use your personal email address on its own. So I did a sort of little tally this morning for any apps I've got, any shopping, Netflix, things like that, insurance, holidays, airlines. It's scary, actually. I've got up to about 150 logins that I know about. And if I added my wife's, we're probably into thousands, I would imagine. But yeah, check yours. But this, just if you're thinking about a business, you can multiply that by many more sort of ways to get in terms of keys to the door.
Yeah, and you know, we are all human. This at the stat at the bottom there that we just flipped on. No need to go back, James. You know, most of these incidents are through fraudulent emails, phishing campaigns. It works because it's easy, and people fall for it. But then, you know, you think about all those logins you have, and if you aren't using a password manager, for example, if you reuse your passwords, if you don't have multi-factor authentication turned on, that criminal then could access all those other logins as well. And then
slide.
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, sorry.
And then following on that note, the final big item, if I was to bucket into the major types of insurance losses we see, are the good old-fashioned data breaches. So, you know, we've become sort of ho-hum about this. You know, we see so many reports of breaches in the news, and I feel a lot of people just kind of go on about their daily business. But when this happens to one of your clients, it is still a significant deal. It gets costly very quickly to get the forensics providers in there, get the legal advice that you will need. And if you need to do notifications, set up a call center, do any credit monitoring, that will add up quite quickly. So, you know, while it may seem like a less risk, or, you know, it's not as, I guess, scary as a ransom attack or social engineering fraud, it is very meaningful and can add up really quickly. The data here on the screen is the information from the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office. And really, I just wanted to show the impact that the launch of GDPR in May of 2018 had on the number of reports in terms of data-related complaints, which could be anything from failure to get proper authorization for sending emails to failure to delete email or delete information upon request, things like that. And then, of course, data breach reports. You see the massive spike there once GDPR came into effect. So data breaches are unfortunately still a very real thing that we see and deal with on a day-to-day basis, really.
So, onto a day-to-day basis, and moving away from some of the technical terminology that we've gone through there. Let's go sort of straight into another poll about objection handling when you're talking to your clients. So same as before, please use your poll on your screen. You should be able to see. And see what your responses are in terms to having conversations with your clients and the biggest blockers. Wow. Got some good responses coming up here if you can see them. I'll give it a few more seconds. Let's get to, so if as many as you can vote as possible, we're over half of you now. The overwhelming response is the client does not think they are exposed, or the client does not understand what cyber covers. Okay, brilliant. Thank you everyone for voting. Obviously, clearly the next few bits will help you with that in terms of educating clients if they think they're not exposed.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's, you know, we've done a similar webinar just last week, and those were the two that we consistently have seen when we're talking with brokers. And it really matches with, there's the results. Yeah, 72% think they're not exposed. That really matches with what we're hearing. And turning back to this UK government survey, one of the key reasons that respondents gave for not thinking they were at risk. So you see here the rather incredibly low percentage of firms that are buying a dedicated cyber insurance policy. Only 14% for small, and even large, only 1 in 5 have that dedicated protection and the breach response part of it that will come along with the dedicated cyber insurance. But what's really concerning to me are the reasons given in response to that study, and similar to what you're hearing from your clients. It's considering themselves not at risk, lack of awareness of cyber insurance. You know, those are things that is really on us as the industry to educate those clients and make them aware of the exposure, number one, make them aware that it can hit everybody, and explain how cyber insurance can respond. So James is going to go through some of these that we tend to hear reported back, and some thoughts as to how to respond to those objections.
Okay, so on the screen here, we just have a list of some common objections to cyber insurance. And I would imagine some of these will sound familiar to some of you on the call. And hopefully by the end of this webinar, you'll be at least a little bit more confident to talk about and overcome at least some of these objections and concerns. So let's cover each one of these in turn to see if we can address them. So only large organisations are targets. Myth or fact? So it's a fact that small and mid-sized firms are just as exposed to data breaches as large firms are. So we're using the same survey from, it's actually from March 2020, so pretty recent, the Cyber Security Breach Survey. As you can see on here, just under 50% of all businesses, if you sort of try and collate that together, report having a cybersecurity attack in the last 12 months. So simple question to one of your clients is a 50-50 chance worth it to one of your clients and not having at least a form of cyber cover? Because the facts point to it's not all large businesses. All businesses, all other surveys and trends point towards all businesses being at form of some sort of high risk. But obviously large, well-known firms are the ones that we see in the headlines. And often, but not always, they have the insurance, the capital and the infrastructure to recover. Most smaller and mid-market businesses may not have that. So a little example of that is actually a well-known and documented thing. It's on a BBC website around a hairdressing salon in Scotland, which is obviously prior to lockdown. They couldn't open their doors to trade for 4 weeks following a ransomware attack in demand. Their phone system, their client booking system, and their tills were all interconnected via the same system. And it's just one example of many that we could try and, well, we're going to try and use quite a few examples to show you where a particular client in a particular industry was severely affected. So the next one, our systems are state-of-the-art. State-of-the-art doesn't ensure security. So I've got a question, which is not a poll, just something to think about. When was the last time you forgot to lock your door at home or in your car? Or put the alarm on at home if you have one? Or update the latest security software on your phone or your PC at home? Just think about that for a second. Another misconception is that state-of-the-art systems are protected. So even though we have the security software on our personal PCs, we regularly get updates from supplier, Microsoft, Apple, etc. This is because new threats are constantly emerging. And the network infrastructure and systems are only as good as the latest known threat. And there's a term called zero-day vulnerability, which means something that wasn't previously known as a vulnerability until that day is discovered. It's called zero-day. And we've seen a few of those examples, and I think WannaCry was one of those things that Davis mentioned earlier. But it's not just an IT issue. Even if you have the best alarm system on your property, for example, you or an employee can forget to lock the door or leave the windows open. Some of the first well-published instances back in the 90s and 2000s, we all know and heard about before, of government employees leaving a laptop on the train, loss of a USB memory stick with 10,000 client details on it. Nowadays, it's more akin to leaving your phone in the car or on the train if you're a business owner. That could potentially be that access to all of your business systems. But what you can see on here on the screen, employees themselves are often the biggest threat to data security, either through inadvertent action that we mentioned, or even accidentally sending an email to the wrong address, or unintentional action. So there was a haulage contractor that in a previous life that actually said this to me in terms of the client. I actually met the client, and after losing his laptop, his systems were hacked, and he didn't know where his vehicle fleet or deliveries were for two weeks, and it had a massive impact on his business and his reputation a year later. So it's something to think about there in terms of how it can affect a business. But some of the things you see on the screen here are where your employee or criminals can get in. So most breaches are opportunistic and they're not targeted. So the victim isn't specifically targeted. I think we all know we've seen that sort of stuff probably in your email inbox personally. But they were identified and attacked because they probably exhibited a weakness to the attacker, and the attacker knew how to exploit it. Most breaches aren't perpetrated by highly sophisticated criminals. So in other words, this can happen to anyone. Most companies don't expect that they will be a target, but hackers find it relatively quick and easy to penetrate most secure networks. And being opportunistic, they go after anyone that's vulnerable. So consider how to put this into perspective. The attackers are looking for opportunities to exploit low-hanging fruit. And they're not having to work too hard to get in. And they can do this very quickly. Conversely, it takes a business quite a while to find out this is happening. So the attacker can be having fun for a matter of months, maybe even years, before anyone learns that something has happened. And as a final nail in the coffin, it's often a third party that tells them, i.e. your client, that something is wrong. It's not their own discovery. And when I read this a few weeks back, it reminded me when I worked for another insurer a few years ago. And one morning, the claims team got several emails from a broker asking them to change payment details for a client on a few ongoing claims. We actually had to tell the broker that they'd been hacked, and it was a very embarrassing conversation that was had. So that should prove to most people that those sort of issues can happen. So we outsource our data, so we're okay, myth or fact. It's not that easy. As you'll see, and you probably know, your client is ultimately responsible for its own data, and they can't outsource that responsibility at all. Davis, do you want to talk a little bit about this? This is one of your subjects.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, it's probably no surprise to everyone on the call, but under GDPR, if you are the data controller, so if the reason the data was collected was because of your client, whether they had outsourced the actual collection of that data, outsourced the processing or storage of that data, regardless of where a breach may occur, that firm is going to be liable under GDPR. Now, they may have a indemnity cause against that firm if the other firm holding the data or processing the data was the cause of the breach. So there may be a cause of action there, but two things really strike me as problematic with that. One, a lot of these data storage companies, particularly if you're dealing with the large, giant companies, will have pretty strenuous terms on the agreements signed with their customer. So that agreement may limit the amount of indemnity that the firm ultimately responsible under GDPR can seek against them. Two, when you think about these companies, they are holding data for a lot of different entities. There was fairly recently a breach of a firm who was holding upwards of 200 solicitor law firms' data. Now we don't know the extent or what that data was, or whether it was actually seen, but there was an incident, and it involved every single one of those companies that were putting that data with that provider. So when you think about that type of situation, even if you do have a valid claim against that outsourced provider, you may be one out of dozens or even hundreds of firms trying to get at that pot. So, I wouldn't feel comfortable relying solely on that. So, that is a couple things to think in mind when you outsource the information. I'm not saying that, outsourcing's bad. In many ways, again, this going back to the managed service providers, you may actually be improving your security posture by using a firm that has the resources to protect that information better than you could yourself. But you got to be aware of the exposure and of your ongoing requirements under the law and liabilities should that information be breached.
So I'll give you an example of that. There was a wholesale baker, and he outsourced his point of sale and online order system to a payment processor. The payment processor had some form of attack, a bit of a ransomware attack, where all of their client details, including the bakers, were encrypted. The baker themselves were responsible for contacting all of their own clients and manage that process, along with all the fallout to his business and reputation that followed. Just one example of where that could happen to any one of your clients. So we can handle the cost of a breach, myth or fact. So if you think coverage is expensive, this is for your client, try dealing with a security breach, because this is where things start to add up significantly. Davis, this is one of your favourites as well, so if you want to sort of talk through a few of these.
Yeah, so when, I often get asked how much cyber insurance should be purchased, and that's a tricky question, and it will, of course, vary by size and exposure and so on. But, that minimum amount probably isn't going to be enough if you just have an add-on to another policy, a package policy or a management liability policy that chucks in $20K, even $50K. That can get erased in hours. When you're bringing in expert IT forensics providers, law firms, the costs add up significantly quick. So, just going back to how much should be purchased, we offer limit options down to $100K. which is good for small firms that are looking to dip their toes into having this sort of protection, and often get asked what minimum premiums are. They're quite low, the cost of these 100K limits. The key thing is that's far better than nothing, because a big part of what you are buying when you buy a dedicated cyber insurance policy is not just the pool of money that it provides, but also the breach response services that come along with it. So you're going to get immediate access to vetted providers, for example. Having said that, 100K is certainly better than nothing, but 100K is in many, many instances, even for small firms, not going to be enough protection. I would say, for a smaller firm, they should be looking to buy $1 million just to be safe. And once you put on the ransom demands that we're now seeing, that is certainly upping the amount of the average claim.
So we've got a list of potential costs up there. I'll give you another example probably to add to the list. So there's a small engineering firm that was making components on an industrial estate. You'll be familiar with that up and down the country. The managing director of this firm visited a local coffee shop regularly to get his caffeine fix, and often brought his laptop with him to log into Wi-Fi and do a little bit of work while he was there. He logged into his emails while having a coffee one day, not knowing that the Wi-Fi was fake that time round. His email system was duplicated in real time, and an email was sent to his financial director back at the firm, went something along the lines of, John, I forgot to send that payment to ABC suppliers before I left. Can you log on to the bank and send a payment of £150,000 to XYZ? And the email signed off with a nickname that the FD called his boss, so he was none the wiser. So social engineering and fraudulent email, and a subsequent payment and loss of another £50,000 resulted from this. So that was £200,000 out the door, not including anything you see on this list here. So that really is a question: can they afford it, or can they afford not to have it?
James, one of the questions just came through about insurability of fines and penalties. So while we're talking about amounts that the policy may cover, might as well touch on this one. The question was particularly, have we reimbursed policyholder fine penalties levied by regulators post-breach? Insofar as we're talking about GDPR, no. There's been very few fines issued by the ICO under GDPR. Those are, of course, going to be subject to a legal determination of whether GDPR fines are insurable. And I'd say, obviously, I can't opine on that definitively. I think no one can. But a lot of legal research has looked into that, and I think initially was pointing towards no, GDPR fines would not be insurable under UK law. But I think there's some leeway for discussion depending on why the fine was issued. A lot of focus is paid to the part of the legislation that applies the upwards of 4% of global turnover as a penalty. The reasons why those would be issued are probably not likely to be insurable due to the nature of actions or negligence that would lead to those types of fines being issued. But there are more administrative type fines under GDPR that can be issued up to 2% of global turnover, which for a lot of firms is 2% still going to be quite a bit. I think, the jury's still out, so to speak, on the insurability of those. But to me, that's a different question. Outside of the EU, I would say yes. Certainly in the US, that jurisdictional setting is more friendly, so to speak, to covering or insuring fines levied for privacy breaches. So the answer to that one is yes.
Okay. Thanks for the question.
One other thing I'd note on that, not to leave it negatively. A key thing about getting a cyber insurance proposition, a dedicated cyber insurance proposition, is that breach response. And we have certainly had incidents that went to the ICO and resulted in a satisfactory response from the ICO, in large part because of the swiftness and how well the response was handled because of that quick response. And you've got the 24/7 hotline, access to top law firms and forensics providers. So that can go a long way to not getting a fine issued in the first place. And then the insurability, of course, is a moot point.
Thank you, Davis, and thank you for the question. So we'll look at this one now. We're already covered 4 cyber events. So I would imagine you, like the rest of us, may have come across instances where clients believe that their existing sort of management liability policy covers this, or any other insurance they've got in place. Let's see if we can cover this one off as best we can in the time available. So, as we've seen, according to sources, up to 3 in 10 businesses actually have cyber cover. So, so the ones that don't, that's we've covered those objections off. If they do already have it, as we've said, that's great. Most cyber policies in the market are robust, but there's no standardisation, which is obviously a confusing area. And it's important to understand the limitations of any given policy. There are just a few limitations that some of you or your clients may think are more important than others that appear on your screen there. But not all policies are created equal, and it's usually pretty easy to determine what is covered. And we've got a great tool to help you with that in our broker sales pack that lists all the coverages and features and helps you compare with existing cover. And we'll cover that off later on before we finish. So let's have one more poll. Same as before, if the poll doesn't work or appear, you can contact Zoom, blame them, not us. How important is quotation speed to win a sale? You guys out there at the sharp end. So if you can encourage as many of you to quote, respond on the poll. I'll be doing the quote. So let's have a look. So nearly up to 70% of you voted. Only 1 or 2 of you think it's not important. A lot of you think it's very important, from 3, 4 and 5 up. So that's where the biggest responses are. So thank you very much for that poll. Let's see if this is where I put myself under pressure and hope my internet connection can take the strain. I'm going to attempt now to do a quote on our system. So I'm just going to bring this slide up here for a second. Some of you may be aware, not be aware, we've got a system called My Travellers. So I'm just going to bring this screen in here. Hopefully you'll all see it in a second. And what I'm going to do is simply go straight into a system called My Travellers. Number of ways to get a quote here. I'm just going to check the time there, 11:40. So let's put myself under pressure, click on cyber, and see if I can get a quote. So first thing here, we've got to put in the company details. So I'm just going to type XYZ. You probably have your company name or number. I'm just going to search. This is searching on Company's House. That should bring up all the details I need. This one here. And it pre-populates everything for you. So there's your XYZ PVT Limited. Down here, it will have their business activities from Company's House. But if you want to change that, if you know what it is, type it in. It helps with us. Quote. So let's say wholesale. Wholesale wine, beer, and spirits. That's pretty good.
Solid choice.
So it is announced yesterday. What's the turnover? So let's say they're 5 million turnover. Their company structure, private limited company. So as you can see at the top here, we're just to see all these bars. We're halfway through. So this platform is designed for management liability quotes. So you can see you can get D&O, crime, etc. You just want a standalone cyber quote. As Davis mentioned earlier, the limits start at 100,000. But if we were to stick a limit in here, what do you reckon, Davis? $1 million. Let's have a look. Lots of material facts we've got to agree. How many employees? So 11 to 50. Let's say they're in more than 2 locations. Agree to that. Start date for the insurance. Today will be the default, or we're changing to the 1st of July for 12 months. Save and continue. So hopefully that should now provide me with a quote. Now I've been multitasking and talking while this whirly thing comes up. Straight away, at the bottom of the screen, you've got a quote there. £213. Sorry, that's the commission. What am I talking about? The premium is 1,364, quite a big one here that I've picked. But I've got the opportunity to amend this quote. So what you'll see here is that for £1 million worth of cover, and the premium here, this is quickly how you get the quote details. So you can flex the commission downwards, I'm hastening to add, and you can change, get the quote sent to you, and you can also open a quote document that's able and tailored to send to your client or use in your reports, which should come up now. There we are. That shows everything you would need on the quote. Let's see if I can get back to that. Oh no, where have I gone? There it was there. So as you can see, it's quite easy to get a quote, and I've done that as well as talking in less than 3 minutes. So I can change this as well if the limits aren't quite right, etc. And all I need to do to confirm cover is click on this button here. So you can quote and bind in under 4 minutes if you're a quicker typer than I am. So hopefully that will give you some confidence in terms of the ability to actually produce a quote. We can talk you through how to get access to My Travellers if you haven't got it already, and we can give you some details and get in contact with us sort of after the webinar. So a question for all of you actually. So are you putting out a cyber quote with all of your renewals? Not a question to answer on a poll, just something to think about. And just think about protecting your PI as a broker. You don't want a client's name or broker never told me about the risks associated with cyber. Tony's raised his hand. If one of you guys in the background would like to answer his question before we go on to the next poll. In fact, Tony, you have raised your hand, but we'll answer that question during the poll. If we can go to this sort of an ultimate poll, as it were. What do you and your clients want to see from carriers in a cyber proposition? If you can have a look at your poll that's on your screen now. Tell us what's most important to you, and we'll see if we can address that in terms of the enhancements that we've recently put on to Traveller's cyber proposition. So let's have a look at what we're getting here. 40% of you, all of the above. 54% so far. So broader coverage, risk management systems, breach response, clear documentation, all of the above. We've got a few others, but clearly all of the above is important to nearly 70% of you that have voted, so thank you for that. So let's see if we can address those things in the next 15 minutes of the presentation to make sure that you're promptly away at 12. So going the extra mile, so this is where I pass over to you, Davis, to look at how our cyber policy or proposition is structured.
All right, yeah, so many of you may have already received notification, may have already seen our new proposition that we just launched at the beginning of May. We really updated 2 things. The coverage itself, we've broadened that out a bit, and we've introduced a number of risk management tools for your clients. The other element of a dedicated cyber policy, of course, is the breach response side. We felt we had that very well covered off. We're one of the top 4 global providers of cyber insurance. So we've got a lot of experience. Our claim team has hundreds of claims under their belt, probably more than that, and a vast network of vendors and providers to provide assistance to your clients. So we felt we had that very well covered off, but the other 2 elements we have enhanced. Don't have time to go through all of this, so I'll just highlight some things that are changed. The policy itself, even where it hasn't been broadened, has gone through quite a big refresh in terms of the readability of it and trying to make it as friendly as possible. It's still cyber insurance. It's changing rapidly. I know, and I don't envy your jobs insofar as there are a lot of wordings out there to be familiar with. And while there is some standardization happening in the market, that we're still a long way from cyber insurance being a standardized policy. So in terms of what we've added as standard within our new form, new coverages, social engineering fraud, so somebody asked about that already, so that is now standard within our policy. Vendor and client payment fraud is a close relative to social engineering fraud, but instead of the insured being the party that was duped into sending money, one of the insured's client or vendors is the party that got duped. We have a new coverage called Betterment that I think is unique in the marketplace. So some of you may be familiar with the concept of Betterment, which generally says if you have suffered an attack and you had software or hardware damaged and you can't replace that because it doesn't exist anymore, let's say a new version has been released, the policy will upgrade you to that next available piece of software or hardware. Our policy actually goes further than that, insofar as we will help the insured buy brand new software or hardware that they didn't have at all, if that software or hardware could have helped prevent the attack or will help prevent a follow-up similar attack in the future. So for example, if you had an infiltration and the IT forensic report comes back and says, you know what, if you had an intrusion detection system, you may have avoided this. We will now help buy that brand new piece of security. I don't think anyone else is doing that. Let me know if I'm misstating that, but I think that is a key benefit for our insureds. It was launched in the US with travelers last summer and has been used quite often and really good feedback. So definitely take advantage of the Betterment coverage. Reputational harm, of course, is a key concern in the cyberspace. So you've had an attack, doesn't necessarily shut your computers down, but your customers may leave because of the negative reputation. So that is now added to the business loss insuring clauses. Other enhancements to the existing business interruption coverage really are additional triggers that we've added in addition to a malicious cyber attack. So a system failure, so programming error or human error that causes the system to go down, not from an attack. Voluntary shutdown, so if an attack is happening and the IT department, to prevent that from spreading further, shuts your own computers down, and as a result, you can't trade, you can't, if you're an online retailer, for example, that is now a trigger for the policy as well. Bricked equipment is, if actual physical hardware is damaged or rendered unusable in an attack, that will now be covered under the policy. That's up to full limit. And then accounting costs. So we'll chip in, it's a $50K sublimit to have the insured get an accountant of their choosing to prepare their business interruption claim. We've increased a lot of sublimits where there are sublimits. So for example, the crime and the dependent business interruption coverages. And a key benefit we're adding for firms under 50 million turnover is an endorsement that waives the excess if notification is provided to us within 72 hours of discovery. So, that's hopefully added incentive to something they already were incentivized to give us quick response to, but time really is critical here. I mentioned the breach response side. We haven't really changed that, but we believe we have the best out there, the best partners, the best experience. So that is still available to our clients. And then the other element that we've added quite a bit on is risk management tools that are available to our insureds. This comes in two forms. One is a eRisk Hub, which is in partnership with a firm called Net Diligence. This is a web-based portal that has a number of tools available, articles. James is going to pull it up here. So incident response plans, different guides. One of the key things for you guys, our broker partners who can't get access to this, if we can send you a code if you'd like to see it. On the bottom, there's a tab for claim scenarios. Net Diligence is one of, if not the, oh, you gotta log in. One of, if not the largest aggregator of insurance, cyber insurance claim information. So they're adding all the time. It is very US heavy at this point, as you can imagine, because cyber insurance has been very US heavy until recently. But there are claims from the UK, from Canada, and elsewhere in the world. You can sort by business sector. You can sort by size.
So Davis, let me choose one that they used. You said was pretty good. What country should I obviously choose from? Or just
you can leave that blank. Just leave that. Yeah.
What sector?
Let's go to manufacturing here.
Yeah.
And
anything else?
Select micro revenue size.
Revenue size. Micro. This one.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Show results.
Yep.
Okay.
This is a couple examples of what you can see here. So click on that one right there. So depending on what the insurer has provided Net Diligence, these descriptions can be as short as just ransomware to an actual more thorough explanation of what happens. But the key thing here is it'll break down the cost to the insured in that, or what wasn't covered by insurance. So you can have a play around with it and really see some examples and get a sense of how these costs can add up for different size firms, for different types of events. The other
one here.
Yeah, go ahead. So here's an example, gives a bit more detail. Again, breakdown of the types of losses paid. So here we had business interruption loss in addition to forensics. The last one was a funds transfer fraud, so that amount was totaled in there. The other key benefit that we've added is a partnership with Symantec. So here, James, you want to go back to the
Yep.
Yeah, so with Symantec, we've added 3 key benefits for our insureds. The first is a cyber resilience readiness assessment that Symantec provides. So that will go through, it's a self-assessment, but it will present a thorough response back of where there may be holes, where improvements can be made, et cetera. But the key thing is we've also added a 1-hour helpline with a security professional at Symantec. So this doesn't have to be tied with the resiliency assessment, but what we would recommend to our insureds is to take that self-assessment, see the results, and then call the helpline and talk with that expert and get their personal advice on how to improve your security posture. The other key benefit that we've added with Symantec, again, is a training series available to employees of our insureds. This is much better than simply a place where videos are and say, hey, employees, go watch these videos, and nobody does, or they don't pay attention. This is actually a cloud-based learning management system where each employee gets registered. There is a dashboard that will track who's completed what, who's watched what, who's passed the quizzes at the end. So you can actually get a true sense of involvement from the employees and completion of that. And then finally, with Symantec, Symantec does offer a lot of services outside of this training, outside of the resiliency, and we've partnered to provide a discount on those services for Travelers Insurance. So some really good stuff. Lot of new things that we've added. So our marketing team has done a fantastic job of putting a lot of this information together, and importantly, there's a lot of tools that are meant to help you when you're having these discussions with your client. So if you go to our cyber page, and one of the documents is called a broker sales pack. Some of you may have seen this already, but this pack is meant to inform you and your clients of the highlights of the proposition, of course, but also help explain to your clients why they may need it. So for example, there's a checklist of going through things like, do you have sensitive employee information? Do you have online customers? Do you have online sales? The idea is, again, going back to the survey results of not feeling that the exposure is there, to try to help get the customers to realize that, one, there is exposure and they need to protect themselves. What we're going through right now is a detailed explanation of the various coverages. There's more than 20 insuring clauses, so each one gives a scenario that may happen and a description of how the policy will respond. We just saw some more thorough claim examples. I'm trying to keep up with James here.
Sorry, Davis. Conscious of time.
Yeah. So here's that kind of checklist I was talking about that we encourage you to go through with your smaller insureds who may not think they have exposure, and hopefully it opens their eyes to the fact that, you know what, yeah, I am a yes for a lot of these, and I do have that cyber privacy exposure. So take a look at it. Would love to hear your feedback. We made all of these documents, hearing brokers ask for more assistance in getting those sales over the line. Hopefully we've come through on that. And then just real quick, our cyber appetite, we feel it's very broad. Generally speaking, most commercial entities are going to be available for ours. The key exceptions that are absolute no's for us at this point in time are healthcare, and that's something that we're working on implementing, and I hope to have that available at some point in the future. We do insure healthcare providers in the US, so it's not something that we're afraid of. We just want to make sure we know the environment here and know how to best provide coverage tailored to that. And then,
okay, just saying, sorry, Davis, I'm just diving in there, just conscious of time now. Just the final poll, just before we finish, to say goodbye and let you escape. Just tell us now on the polls, on a scale to 1 to 5, how confident are you at selling cyber insurance before you go? So we'd love your feedback. See if we've increased your confidence levels just a little bit to everything. Have that extra conversation you may not have had in the past. And it's great to see your responses there. A lot more of you, a little bit more confident. So if we've moved you up one level of scale, that's really important to us. And thank you very much. And that we hope you found that useful and you took something away. So to make sure we finish on time, so that still says 12 o'clock on my screen. Thank you very much for joining. Like I said, we really hope you took something away from that. Our contact details are here. If you've got any questions later, or if you want to get in touch, on the left there, you've got my contact details, John's contact details, and Kieran. Please do get in touch. Apologies if I saw one or two of you raise your hand with a couple of questions. So we couldn't answer those straight away. We have just conscious.
Yeah, by all means, reach out to the team, and we'll get those questions answered for you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers now.